Story 1: The Dead End in the Dark. It was May 14th, 2008. 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was celebrating the end of the spring semester with friends. It was a normal, mundane Wednesday night in rural Minnesota. Just after midnight, Brandon left a party in the town of Canby to make the short, familiar drive back to his home in Marshall. It should have taken him 30 minutes. He never arrived. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon's parents, Brian and Annette, received a phone call. It was Brandon. He sounded frustrated but not panicked. He explained that he had accidentally driven his Chevy Lumina into a ditch. He wasn't hurt, but the car was stuck, and he needed them to come pick him up. Brandon confidently told his parents he was near the town of Lind, a place he knew well. Brian and Annette got in their car and drove to the location. But when they arrived, there was no sign of Brandon. There was no car. They stayed on the phone with him, both parties flashing their headlights, desperately trying to signal each other in the pitch-black rural night. Nothing. Brandon couldn't see their lights, and they couldn't see his. Frustration mounted. Brandon, believing he knew exactly where he was, decided to leave his vehicle. He told his parents he was going to walk toward the lights of what he thought was the town of Lind. For the next 47 minutes, Brian and Annette stayed on the line with their son as he walked through the darkness. He described his surroundings: gravel roads, fences, the sound of water. The conversation was normal, just a father and son navigating an annoying inconvenience. Then, at 2:10 a.m., the mundane reality shattered. Mid-sentence, Brandon suddenly yelled, "Oh shit!" Immediately after, the line went dead. His parents frantically called back again and again. It went straight to voicemail. The police were called. A massive search was launched. When authorities finally located Brandon's car, the discovery only deepened the mystery. The car wasn't anywhere near Lind. It was 25 miles away, near the town of Taunton. Brandon had been entirely wrong about his location. But that wasn't the most chilling part. Search dogs tracked Brandon's scent from the car across fields to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River. The scent followed the riverbank for a distance. And then, it simply stopped. It vanished into the water. Yet, despite years of exhaustive searches, draining sections of the river and deploying advanced sonar, no trace of Brandon Swanson, no clothing, no phone, no remains has ever been found. Whatever caused him to scream those final 2 words in the dark remains completely unknown. Story 2: The Terminal Sprint. In June 2014, 28-year-old Lars Mittank traveled from Germany to Varna, Bulgaria, with a group of friends for a summer vacation. It was supposed to be a week of beaches, drinking, and relaxation. But a minor altercation changed everything. Lars got into a brief, relatively minor scuffle with some other tourists over a football rivalry. During the fight, he was struck in the ear, suffering a ruptured eardrum. When it was time to fly home, a local doctor advised Lars not to board an airplane. The pressure changes in the cabin could cause permanent damage to his injured ear. His friends offered to stay behind with him, but Lars insisted they leave. He would stay in a cheap hotel for a few days, take the antibiotics the doctor prescribed, and fly back later. The moment his friends left, Lars's behavior shifted dramatically. He called his mother, Sandra, in Germany, in a state of absolute panic. Whispering into the phone, he told her that people were trying to kill him or rob him. He told her to cancel his credit cards immediately. He claimed he was hiding from 4 men who were following him. The hotel's CCTV footage from that night confirms a severe paranoia. Lars is seen pacing the halls, hiding in elevators, and staring out of windows for hours, terrified of an invisible threat. The next morning, July 8th, Lars took a taxi to the Varna airport. He was evaluated by the airport doctor, Dr. Kosta Kostov. The doctor later reported that Lars seemed exhausted and highly erratic. During the examination, a construction worker briefly entered the clinic. Upon seeing the worker, Lars suddenly panicked. He muttered, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." What happened next is one of the most famous and baffling pieces of CCTV footage on the internet. The cameras capture Lars bursting out of the doctor's office. He has left all of his belongings behind: his luggage, his passport, his wallet, his phone. He runs through the crowded airport terminal, his eyes wide, sprinting as if a demon is right on his heels. He bursts through the automatic sliding doors, runs across the parking lot, and scales an 8-foot barbed wire fence with sheer adrenaline. The cameras watch him drop down on the other side into a dense field of sunflowers. He runs into the tall stalks, and that is the last time Lars Mittank was ever seen. Despite international manhunts, endless theories about a reaction to the antibiotics, or an undiagnosed head injury from the fight, Lars sprinted out of existence, fleeing a threat that only he could see. Story 3: The Contagion of Fear. In August 2016, Mark and Jacoba Tromp, along with their 3 adult children, Mitchell, Ella, and Rihanna, were living a successful, quiet life on their berry farm in Victoria, Australia. By all accounts, they were grounded, rational business owners. But over the course of a few days, a bizarre, suffocating paranoia infected the entire household. They became utterly convinced that someone was out to get them. They believed their phones were hacked, their house was bugged, and hitmen were actively hunting them. There was no evidence of this. No threats, no financial ruin, no criminal ties. Yet, the fear was absolute. On August 29th, the panic reached a breaking point. The family decided they had to flee immediately. In a state of sheer terror, they left their farm unlocked, keys in the ignitions of their cars, financial documents scattered on the floor. To ensure they couldn't be tracked, they left all of their mobile phones, credit cards, and passports behind. The 5 of them piled into a single SUV and drove north, fleeing an entirely phantom enemy. What followed was a deeply disturbing road trip fueled by a shared, escalating delusion. As they drove further away from home, the reality of their situation began to fracture their unity. Mitchell, the eldest son, was the first to break from the shared psychosis. He realized they were acting insane. He demanded to be let out of the car, entirely abandoning his family to hitchhike back to the real world. Shortly after, the 2 daughters, Ella and Rihanna, also realized something was terribly wrong. They separated from their parents, stealing a stranger's car to escape their own mother and father. Rihanna was later found hiding in the back of a local farmer's utility truck, completely catatonic, staring blankly ahead, entirely disconnected from reality. Mark and Jacoba, now alone, continued their frantic escape. They eventually abandoned their SUV and separated. Jacoba was found wandering the streets of a town miles away, highly agitated and completely disoriented. Mark, the father, remained missing for days before being found walking near a local airport, refusing to explain what he was running from. To this day, the Tromp family refuses to fully explain what triggered their mass flight. Psychiatric experts call it folie à deux, or in this case, folie à cinq, a rare psychiatric syndrome where symptoms of a delusional belief are transmitted from one individual to another. But the chilling question remains, How does a successful, perfectly normal family look at each other over the breakfast table, collectively agree that invisible assassins are coming for them, and leave their entire lives behind? Story 4. The Ghost in the Machine. On December 30th, 2000, in the quiet Setagaya ward of Tokyo, the Miyazawa family, Father Mikio, Mother Yasuko, 8-year-old daughter Niina, and 6-year-old son Rei, were settling in for the night. Sometime around 11:30 p.m., an intruder bypassed the park behind their home and climbed up a tree to gain access to a second-floor bathroom window. What followed was the total annihilation of the family. The violence was extreme and deeply personal, despite no known motive or connection. But the true horror of the Setagaya murders isn't just the loss of life. It's the chilling psychological profile left behind in the hours that followed. Most killers flee the scene immediately, driven by adrenaline and the terror of being caught. This intruder did not. After wiping out the entire family, the killer stayed in the house for hours. He went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and ate 4 cups of melon-flavored ice cream, leaving the empty cups neatly lined up. He rummaged through the family's first aid kit, calmly bandaging a deep cut on his own hand he sustained during the attack. He drank barley tea. He used the family's toilet and deliberately didn't flush it. But the most disturbing detail was his interaction with the victim's belongings. The killer logged onto Mikio Miyazawa's computer. He browsed the internet, clicking through the victim's company website and reading the family's personal emails. He even attempted to purchase tickets to a theater show online, casually surfing the web while the bodies of the family lay in the adjacent rooms. He stayed in the house for nearly 10 hours. He even took a nap on the family's sofa. When the sun came up on New Year's Eve, the killer gathered a change of clothes from Mikio's closet, folding his own blood-soaked clothes and leaving them behind, and casually walked out the front door into the morning light. He left behind a mountain of evidence: DNA, fingerprints, his clothes, a fanny pack containing sand from a specific skate park in Nevada, and the murder weapon. He left a trail so obvious it felt arrogant. Yet, despite having a perfect genetic profile and over 280,000 officers working the case over 2 decades, the phantom who ate ice cream in a house of the dead has never been identified. Story 5. The Voice in the Cage. In June 2006, 21-year-old nursing student Frauke Liebs was watching a World Cup match at a pub in Paderborn, Germany, with friends. Around 11 p.m., she borrowed a friend's battery to send a quick text to her roommate, Chris, saying she was heading home. She walked out of the pub and began the short walk to her apartment. She never arrived. For most disappearances, the trail goes immediately cold. But Frauke's case took a deeply sinister turn. The next day, Chris received a text message from Frauke's phone. It read, "Coming home later. Game was fun. See you later." It was slightly reassuring, but entirely out of character for Frauke to stay out without coming home first. But then, the phone calls started. Over the next 6 days, Frauke called her roommate and her family a total of 5 times. These weren't hostage negotiations. There were no ransom demands. The calls were brief, bizarre, and entirely controlled. Every time the phone rang, Frauke sounded groggy, heavily drugged, and exhausted. Her captor was clearly standing right next to her, dictating what she could and could not say. When asked where she was, she would mechanically reply, "I can't say." When asked if she was in danger, she would hesitate and then say, "No." During one of the final calls, her sister managed to get on the line and desperately asked, "Are you being held against your will?" There was a long, agonizing pause. Frauke, her voice trembling, finally whispered a single word.
Yes.
Then, as if realizing her captor heard her, she rapidly backtracked.
No.
Police frantically traced the calls. They discovered a terrifying pattern. The calls weren't coming from a single location. They were bouncing off different cell towers across the industrial outskirts of Paderborn. Her captor was loading her into a vehicle every single night, driving her to a new location, waking her up, and forcing her to make these pacifying phone calls to her family, just to buy himself more time and confuse the investigation. He was taunting the police. The final call came on June 27th. Frauke's voice was barely a whisper, completely devoid of hope. She repeated her robotic phrases. I am coming home today. I am fine. Her family pleaded with her to tell them where she was. The line went dead. That was the last time anyone heard Frauke's voice. Weeks later, in October, a hunter walking through a densely wooded area off a rural highway found her remains. Because of the prolonged exposure to the elements, a cause of death could not be determined. The autopsy revealed no blunt force trauma, no gunshot wounds, and no stab wounds. The identity of the man who abducted her, kept her heavily sedated for a week, drove her through the night to make those chilling phone calls, and finally discarded her in the forest, remains completely unknown. The audio of a young woman desperately trying to signal for help while her captor listens, inches away, remains one of the darkest, unresolved horrors of modern true crime.